I'm gonna claim that this is their last Monday night game for a while.
No, it'll be such high drama tonight. They'll be trying to get them on prime every week just because they're dramatic.
Be careful. I think I'm in Wisconsin, but I think the symposium, we should be in Michigan right now. Probably more Packers fans up there anyways, but
yeah, that's probably accurate. And even those of us that are downstate, I mean, I lost hope in the Lions 25 years ago, so I don't think anybody's going to be offended. Green Bay's a good team.
yeah.
But yeah, you want to start us off, Dan?
Yeah, well, we have our final session of the day, and certainly not our least session of the day. This is a really exciting topic today that we're going to be hearing from both Jen and Gary about, and they can do it a lot more justice than I can. Scott, I don't know if you want to do an additional introduction, and then we'll turn it over to Gary and Jen.
Another thing that's probably worth sharing with our attendees is just, do be aware that if you're going to join us tomorrow, that we are on the schedules on Eastern Standard Time, and so we'll have our welcome and announcements and the prayer and song at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, followed by other sessions that will flow out of the same seed and food sovereignty kind of concept, but we'll save that for the morning. And we just want to, welcome both you, Gary, and Jen to this session. And Erica and I will kind of behind the scenes after you guys present, we'll check and see what kind of questions there are and present those to you. And it looks like we have up till 6:30, so we have plenty of time. And if we don't need to take that, that's okay as well. Okay. So thank you for joining us and sharing what you're going to share.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to open the slides.
You will start our PowerPoint.
Okay, do you see them?
Yes,
Okay,
I do.
go ahead.
Others do too. So in the time we mark on powers and aswisian toto manua yo wasa got man so everybody, greetings. My name is Gary Besaw. I am Menominee. I am Bear Clan, and my real name, the name I pray with every morning, and I hope we all do, but that is Oscar Powers. That's like in old Menominee, that's like a translator or a messenger, and that's how that name was given to me. So we can start out. Jen and I will both give our intros here, but I had served as chairman of our tribe several terms. I'd also been vice chair and secretary. And when I traveled, I saw all of these tribes and communities that really had their indigenous food system, or they had their regional for non-natives food systems together. And I was so envious in a good way and proud that they would have that. And we vowed that Menominee, knowing our problems with health, whether with the health indicators, whether it's diabetes or heart disease or obesity or heart symptoms, there are so many things that we decided at the tribal level that we needed to take this as a focus, that we tried to bring healthy foods back into our culture. So this will be some of that discussion here today. And now I'll turn it over to Jen to introduce herself.
Hi everyone. My Oneida name, it means smoke going straight up. I'm Oneida and I am Wolf Clan. I have decades, gosh, I'm getting old, of experience in food safety and legislation. And so I come to the Menominee Department of Ag and Food Systems, where my primary responsibilities are food policy, food code, and helping in ways to build more tribal food sovereignty. I was a health inspector for many, many years for the Oneida Nation. And I was a program evaluator for the United Nations Environmental Department, among other jobs I had. And then most recently, I was the director of the United Nations Legislative Reference Office. So I had a hand in helping to develop all kinds of legislation for the United Nations. And in 2001, I helped to adopt the United Nations first food code. And it was just recently amended 2 years ago, I guess. So I have a lot of experience in food code and food policy and food safety, and a little bit of experience as a new farmsteader and grower down here on the Oneida Reservation.
Okay, let's progress the slides, Jen. Thank you. No, I hope people can see this. What we had done through the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health is we had applied for a grant. There was a 5-year grant through the Wisconsin Partnerships Program. And we applied and we said, you know, we are Menominee. We are what others call us Menominee, you know, wild people of the wild rice. But our word for ourselves is Gaius Mamachitawak. That's ancient ones, or more descriptively, it's ancient movers. So that connotation really is that we're full of life, and we had moved from all of these different camps, whether it was a hunting camp, a ricing camp, spearing camps, gardening camps, ricing camps, you name it, we moved and we sustainably stayed in these camps through the year. We moved around. So we had a very, very robust system in place, including the intertribal trading that had gone on. In fact, it was interesting to see in Michigan, in the state of Michigan, even some of the information regarding areas and documentation of Menominee that had gone over into Lower Michigan as part of our trading and discussions and negotiations. It showed that we had a very robust system at one time. And what you didn't have, we had trading routes existing that we would trade. Well, we need to get back to those. We need to start recreating those. And while at one time we had almost 12 million acres, through treaties, we are down to about 250,000 acres. And while it's the largest reservation east of the Mississippi, for us to do the type of food systems and the type of moving from camp to camp that we once did, we just cannot do that in a sustainable fashion. We would put too much stress on the lands that we have. So we decided we need to look at creating that trading routes again, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So we wrote a grant here where we said that we wanted to look at creating a system that created the good, healthy foods we once had and avoided some of the things like the glyphosate and other things that we know harm the environment and also harm inside of us. It's harming us inside. And many of these types of diseases and whatnot, we're getting traced to them. So I'm not going to go to that, but that's some of the backstory with this. So we wrote a grant and we said over 5 years, we would like to provide training and really look at policy change in these areas. And you'll see these areas I'm going to quickly go through because you can see those. We wanted to identify space for ag and food systems training and demonstrations. So we looked at three former farms at one time on the reservation. And we said, let's take those and let's try to rebuild those and rehab those or assist those who might be doing that. Because Menominee always said, well, we're not farmers. We've never milked cows or slop pigs. We don't do that. Well, there are types of farming that we had done. We are indigenous agriculturalists, and we have proof along the Menominee River that separates upper and upper Michigan from Wisconsin, the interstate water boundary, the Menominee River. We have proof along there of raised garden beds for miles going along the Menominee River. And we told Western scientists, well, yeah, this is ours. This is what we did. And they told us, basically patted us on the head and said, oh, that's nice, Menominee. I'm glad you think that, but it's at this latitude, it's too high for somebody like you all. This is too sophisticated for you. Even during, over 1,000 years ago in mini ice age, you guys couldn't have done that, but it's okay. Well, proof was we did do that. We proved it, that was Menominee, and indigenous people indeed are very sophisticated in how they go about and what they know of the environment. So we want to use some of that original type of indigenous knowledge to recreate the food systems we have and had without using Roundup, without using those types of chemicals that we know are hurting this world. So we found these places, these 3 farms on the reservation that we are looking to use now to help rebuild and provide some of that training. Everything I talked about growing participation, empowerment, ownership, and pride, well, that's the piece I just talked about. We do understand that not only Menominee, others have that sophistication and that knowledge. We're survivalists and we've been that. And when we start telling this to some of the younger Menominee, you can see their little bird chests just stick out. And they're so proud that, yeah, this is us. You're darn right, this is us. And agriculture is a part of our culture. It is indeed a part of our culture. So now people are saying, if we want to go back to our culture, this has to be a piece of that then. So that was excellent that we could bring that back in and use that to justify what we already knew. We want to improve access to ag land, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We are starting farmers markets and trying to push food into that and try to get people used to, again, having food and having fresh food, perishable food that we know is good for them, and getting them used to that type of healthy food that is made without any type of genetically modified or otherwise. We wanted to improve access to technical experts, and we do that through this grant. We have access to the Great Lakes Indigenous Law Center, and you can see that up on the top here. Within the Wisconsin Partnership Program, they said you have to have an academic partner to apply for the grant. Well, we took the law school at the University of Wisconsin, and underneath it, one of the departments, one of the divisions was the Great Lakes Indigenous Law Center. So we work with individuals that are attorneys, and Daniel Cornelius happens to be one of those, that are attorneys that understand law, but more importantly, in our eyes, they are those who understand law, but also understand that Indigenous perspective. And so they come from that same paradigm that we do, so they understand what we are talking about. And all of you who are Indigenous on this know that you have to translate as you go forward. Well, the good part is when you're working with Indigenous attorneys, so many times you don't have to do that translation or as much. We wanted increased consumption of Menominee foods. So that means trying to bring even something, and people might say maple syrup or sugar is bad. And indeed, processed sugar is terrible, but maple syrup and maple sugar, well, it still has it's still sugar. It's natural, and it has many, many good minerals within it. And just the fact that it comes clean, and you indeed need sugar sometimes, this is a better type of sugar if we're going to use a sweetener. So we wanted to look at that and increasing some of the wild rice and other natural foods off our reservation that we could get to people, instead of using what we were told were good, but we found otherwise, and the elders told us that. We wanted to review we wanted to look at policy change in creating a system that is embedded into what we now know as our laws and ordinances, and all reservations have this. Well, we wanted to review existing elements of a food and ag and food system, including our tribal housing policies, where we try to enable people to be able to have gardens, to have beehives both for honey and for the pollination, and to look at poultry farming, to be able to raise chickens or turkeys or ducks or other things, even on tribal residential in trust residential lot that an individual may have, a tribal member. We wanted to make it where if you went out and bought all of this equipment, and you bought the beehives, you bought the poultry, you buy this, well, all of a sudden now, without that accompanying policy, you might be in jeopardy of losing that, because God knows how, but there's a potential for that unless you put it in your law and in your policy under certain conditions that it's allowed. So we want to make sure and give people that certainty by showing what could happen here and making the policy so that enables it. We want regular communication with the community. They put my department under one of the tribe's standing legislative committees that I report to regularly. We actually even have an advisory council of bunch of old crusty Menoms. Well, they ain't all crusty, most of us are, but these are those individuals that had not given up that older, what others would call organic, but we call that indigenous methods of farming and of agriculture. So we brought people on to help with that communication and really getting a feel for what's there. We want to establish agreements with local programs and businesses around food sharing. So one of the things we've done is where individuals are looking, hey, is there a way we can also look at supporting indigenous foods into our aging feeding establishments? Can we get it into the schools? How can we work? So we're trying to make sure that we follow that same thought of creating that policy. So that's what we're trying to do. And you can see that in this next bullet, that draft custom food code. So that's what we're trying to do, is to make one that not only talks about food safety, but it also starts bringing in indigenous gathered foods and other foods that we can look at using our own sovereignty, make laws around it for protection of our tribal members. Again, the changing the housing policies to support individual food sovereignty. We want to do that both with houses that are on tribal trust land, on residential lots, but we're also then looking at going to our HUD houses and saying, well, we want to make sure, we know people move around on these. We want to find a way that we can have our housing departments agree with us on what should happen. And finally, we're looking at a food production site or a facility for food processing. And that's for entrepreneurs to be starting, but it's also to help in training people to do their own canning and preserving and smoking and processing. So this is that type of grant. It's a 5-year grant. It's great having Jen here because she brings a wealth of knowledge with her to Menominee to work with us. So let's move on to the next slide, Jen. Can you move on? There we go. Okay, so you heard me talk about health equity, assert tribal sovereignty to increase access to healthy foods and reverse lingering effects of historical trauma and disruption of traditional lifeways. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to recreate. The old timers had it right. They knew what they were doing, and through 12,000 years, you know, they must have did something right. We're still here. Indigenous people had been some of the healthiest people on planet Earth here. One of the things that they said when they first come here, the Jesuit missionaries and others, they come here and they said, hey, these guys are healthy, they're bright, they're, you know, something's good here. And indeed it was. It's, in fact, our word for Wisconsin is Wisconsin. And that means a good place to live. That's a Menominee word. And it meant good food, good health, good water, good medicines. So we want to merge our long-term goals again through the grant is merging traditional lifeways with modern practices. So we're going to look at that food code and we're going to find out what indeed is good with what we have learned. There are many things that we know we do different than 10,000 years ago. We can take some of these modern practices and use them. There's nothing wrong with using a hoop house. We can do that. We want to do everything in a good, healthy way, everything that we do. So we have a pinky promise amongst growers, and we understand this is what we need to do as we go forward to be able to get enough product to really make that impact. Capacity building, we want to increase the understanding, skills, and abilities of the community to produce Menominee foods safely. So not only at these 3 farms that we are talking about, because they're not necessarily even farms, but there are 3 areas where we're trying to build the foods. And that means we have to look at assisting them with water, with fencing, with some of the practices that need to happen. And we need to be able to do that in today's days, just like we are here on Zoom, as well as in person. So we're trying to look at embedding these and using our tribal college to help entice or to provide additional structure with it. We're looking at systems change. Like I said, we're trying to create tribal ordinance, policy, and land use. We're trying to rezone some of the land that we have. There are many areas where when the feds come here initially, part of the reason we had been given this forest through our treaties was because they said it wasn't good for farming. Lands to the south were better for farming. They said, this land you have now, it's too wild. There's too many rocks. There's too many trees. There's too much water. There's too much streams. It's wild. And they said, it's not good for farming. Let's give it to the Menoms there. There's some sandy soils here too. So we're trying to look at on some of those areas where Menominee have farmed, and there are good areas on here. It's not all as wild as we think, but we're trying to regrow and actually rezone some of our lands. We're looking at, it may not sound like a lot, but 600 to 800 acres rezoned back into agriculture. So we're trying to use our existing ordinance and law policies to put land back in so that we understand what's there and we can do that, help with them. So Jen, let's switch up and you take the next.
Okay, so we have this grant, we have some goals, but I think it's important that everyone understand the challenges that Menominee faces. And Menominee has a lot of challenges when it comes to tribal food sovereignty. They're probably very similar to the other challenges that other tribes have. But the challenges that we are particularly focused on are the fact that a lot of the communities have limited access to healthy foods. And, presumptively, if you don't have access to healthy foods, we're going to have poor health outcomes. So that's one thing that we focus on. There aren't enough Indigenous producers in the region to provide product to tribal communities. And so if you were in the last session, you heard me talk about this a little bit, but we need more Indigenous producers producing culturally appropriate foods. And there isn't an intertribal egg co-op in the region that tribes can purchase from. So if we had a lot of Indigenous farmers growing a little bit of food, and all of that food was getting sold to an intertribal co-op, that co-op could then sell wholesale, that would help to alleviate a lot of our food sovereignty.
Jen, you got muted. If you could unmute, it must have.
Sorry. So the opportunities are, the inverse of the challenges. Increasing access to healthy foods will decrease the rate of poor health outcomes. If we can improve access to agricultural resources and supporting and beginning farmers, we can increase the number of tribal producers. And if we had an Indigenous egg co-op in the Great Lakes region, we'd be able to provide more Indigenous food to our communities. So this is sort of the premise of all of the programming and decisions that we've been making and will continue to make in the future. And over the last couple of years, so DAFIS is the Department of Ag and Food Systems in Menominee is, I think, 3 years old now. And I've been there for 1 year. And since the beginning of DAFIS, you know, the framework of how we work has changed and evolved. And I think this framework is sort of where we've landed. And so we want to address food sovereignty at 3 sort of different scales. And the first one is, how can we help the individual or the individual family to become food sovereign? What can we do? The second element is tribal food sovereignty. How can we ensure that the Menominee tribe is food sovereign? And then lastly, how can we work to have intertribal food sovereignty? How can Menominee and Oneida and Red Cliff and Bad River and all of the other tribes in our area collaborate and work together to ensure that we're all food sovereign? So one of the individual food sovereignty or the family food sovereignty is one area that we have worked on. We have had plant and seed giveaways. This last spring, we gave over 2,000 plants out. I started doing phone surveys last week, and so far everyone has been successful with their garden and they are eating food from their garden. So that was very exciting to start hearing from folks who came to the plant giveaway. We do provide some backyard garden services, tilling, raised beds, things like that. On a limited basis. There just aren't enough of us in the department to do very much of that, but we'd like to do more. This summer, we started a tool library. So if you need a shovel, if you need a rake, you can come to the tool library and check that out for free. And those sorts of items you can keep for the season if you want. The larger things, the rototillers and things like that, we have a little bit of a limit on, but the tool library started this summer. We have the advisory committee that Gary spoke to earlier that helps us make decisions. Of late, they've really been helping us decide what kind of equipment we need to buy. We've been buying tractors and implements and trailers, and they help us make those decisions. We've put in a lot of wells and a lot of fencing in areas around the reservation to help growers. The equipment, the tractors and the trailers. And then the 2 things we have coming up are the food safety training that will lie with the food code once the food code is drafted and adopted. And then the last thing on this list is the community kitchen and business incubator. So we are in the beginning stages of renovating a building and turning what was a rec center into a community kitchen where people can come to do their family food processing. So they're canning and they're drying and they're smoking for family use. And then also act as a business incubator. So if you're a caterer or you want to be a caterer, you can use that kitchen to do those sorts of things. And then the second level of food sovereignty that we talk about is tribal food sovereignty. And the way that we can address that, Gary has touched on a lot already, but that's through public policy and economic support. So rezoning land has been a focus of ours over the last year. Adopting policies that promote sustainable ag. The food code that will reflect Menominee values and tribal food production planning. So these are the things that will help the Menominee tribe as a whole community become more food sovereign. This one's yours, Gary.
Okay, we have one of the farms we had talked about is actually one given to a 501c3, an NGO called Monneconicum on the reservation, and they are taking what used to be, and these are some beef cattle that we are starting on one of the other farms on the reservation, and we wean the calves, and then they would then be moved to Menoconicum to to graze and to finish over there. So we are trying to look at how do we take each of the best out of what we have started and make sure that what we say is we're following it under that same premise that we believe the old timers did, and this is community. So we're saying what's best for the reservation right now, what needs to happen, and we're getting buy-in. We're not finding people that are looking at within this food sovereignty initiative are looking at trying to say, well, this is mine, get away, this is mine, or I'm going to make a big buck. Everybody is saying right now, let's rebuild this system. We know it's broken. We're not McDonald's, Hardee's people, we really are people that we understand what's right for us and what needs to happen. So we're following in the footsteps of many of our elders, as all of us on here are, and we understand what needs to happen. So we're making that move. This happens to be a barn that we had retrofitted to be able to house the calves. And this is one of the workers at Monneconicum who's there working with them. So he gets used to them, or they get used to him as we start making that transition. And we're using WITCAC and NRCS funding to be able to look at providing some of the fencing and some of the nutrient management in the fields, and to be able to set up some of the irrigation as well. So we're trying to be the department that can kind of take some of those headaches away from people who want to, they want to grow, they want to be able to produce, they want to be able to work with people and stay away from the red tape. And that would be Jen and I working with the red tape piece. So we're making those changes. We're dealing with the infrastructure and dealing with the bureaucracy, and we're hoping we, as that intermediary, can help people. Jen?
Yeah, so as you've all heard me say at least twice, we'd really like to ultimately get to a place where tribes are cooperating amongst ourselves. And so if we could get tribes to collaborate, if we could build this agricultural co-op that can act as a wholesaler for us, I think that would take us a long, long way in food sovereignty. And think of the pandemic, recovering from this pandemic in a way, and maybe taking the federal funding that we've all been talking about of late, and addressing these intertribal cooperative projects. I think that we can start to act more independently from the federal and state governments that sometimes hem us in when it comes to food. And we've discussed that already today too. But I think this is I will say long-term, but hopefully not so long-term project that I would really, really like to see in our area. And I think that if we can grow markets and we can demonstrate that there are markets for these small scale indigenous growers, that we can get to this sort of co-op phase, which I think is very exciting.
Okay, so as we try to move to the intertribal cooperative, several things should be piloted or put in place to get to that. And quite frankly, this is my editorial, I think in Native American gaming, just the whole concept of gaming has has pushed us away from that type of coordination and cooperation we once had. And now to look at any type of agreements between tribes, or as we start coming together to build a cooperative, there's a whole lot of where you know, questions come up. What about mediation? What if we have an issue? Are you waiving sovereign immunity? You know, all of these kind of questions come in that, quite frankly, may or may not have been so front and center if it wasn't for the problems, and I will say problems with tribal gaming that has come about. So that's the bad laundry coming with the good. So we're looking at several things that to me are a little easier to deal with. One is we looked at, and I thank Dan for helping us with this, Dan Cornelius. We looked at our tribal elder food box program that we had been awarded. So there were several things. We noticed that within the whole pandemic, that it was just magnified that our elders were health compromised. They had lived through a lot of the poverty, and we all know how elders are. If they have something good are worthwhile, when the grandkids or someone comes over, half of that's out the door. You know, they're going to take care of them. And we saw that our elders needed good food. We were losing too many of them, just like everybody else. And we said, let's try to find a way, number one, to get healthier foods, whether it's indigenous foods by tribal members, or whether it is foods that that are grown that others might call organic, or are grown in a sustainable, environmentally friendly way. We want to support those also, but we wanted to look at, let's get healthy food to our elders. Let's try to support and find a way to get food, purchase food from indigenous vendors, producers, so we can kind of ramp them up and build them. And we also wanted to start understanding the whole food system. You know, if you're going to start buying from people in a cooperative, we have to understand some of that. So we're saying, let's try to roll all of this stuff together and understand all the shipping and growing and ordering that takes place within a food system nowadays. So we talked to Feeding Wisconsin, and one of the things when we start talking about our needs is Feeding Wisconsin said, hey, Feeding America has a grant out there that we think if tribal organizations or tribes are really serious about recreating an indigenous food system, we believe we can help you. We wrote for the grant, and we received the funding, and Menominee, Oneida, and Red Cliff are participants with their tribal elders being given food boxes, and that's 900 boxes every other week, so twice a month. So 900 boxes twice a month, and this food is coming, and it's fresh and it's perishable, and it includes as organic or as indigenous as we can find, and it also includes purchasing from Red Cliff, for instance, getting whitefish, lake trout, other types, and they said, well, you know, we we may or may not have to even give, I hope you don't mind, but smoked fish. And we don't mind, you know, we can get the smoked fish. And we also had bison and beef cattle from Oneida and apples. So we start trying, well, who has stuff? And I know through Forest County, Potawatomi, where we're purchasing some greens. And I can't remember who else, but I was so happy to hear that we're purchasing from indigenous producers. And hopefully, if we can be a steady customer for them in this purchasing, then they have a chance now to get a wash and pack, you know, system, a bigger one that they can purchase, or they can get more fencing or upgrade their irrigation, whatever it is. But we want to help them grow so they can be part of that economy and that economic growth we want, that we know is a sustainable, environmentally sound type of environmental or economic growth that tribes want. So we got this. So one of the things we also wanted to do when we got the grant was we said, hey, can we also be tagging right alongside you, right on your shoulder, and understanding the full food procurement from growth through procurement, ordering, everything. How does that work? So they're teaching us or showing us, well, typically we order product in, we tell the producers what we want in November. Well, I didn't know that. That's when they start ordering and saying, hey, we're going to be asking in spring and summer for X amount of zucchini or of beef or whatever. They start putting in orders and saying that's what we need. And they start talking about that whole reciprocal process of about the producers being able to say, within so many days, I'm going to let you know that this many tomatoes and types of tomatoes will be ready during the month of, you know, pick a month, you know, of September or whatever. So we start understanding their timing on how they do this. And we start understanding the size and the costing of the warehousing and the coolers and the transportation that needs to take place, even down to the type of boxes. You know, do these need to be wax coated? Do these need to have a brace in them because we're going to put watermelons or cantaloupe in them besides? And is that going to crush the boxes when you start stacking them on pallets? And do you need some type of frozen a van that is refrigerated? Do you have to have that? Well, what are all the processes involved? So we have that program, and it's great. It runs out in December, but we are looking at now the potential of it being extended, but maybe not to that same funding level. So we're back to the grant writing again. So that's our tribal elders food box program. And one of the things that also did was it got the tribes to be able to start working with each other at a level where tribes typically might not. So we have to look at the types of agreements that we have and how we start coming to any type of settlement with any kind of disputes. Well, this for sure came forefront when we looked at the FDIPR 2018 Farm Bill project. Jen, how about I let you talk on some of the Farm Bill?
Okay, so I like to think of the Tribal Elder Food Box Program as sort of our first baby step, leading to this more collaborative intertribal effort. It's been awesome thing to experience and watch. I don't mind using the word groundbreaking when it comes to this program. It's been just inspirational and a huge learning curve. The second baby step, a little more than a baby step, is this FDIPR Farm Bill demonstration project. So when this grant, actually before it was posted, Menominee and Oneida had a conversation that maybe the best way to, or a unique way to apply for this grant would be to do it cooperatively. And so that's what we did. So Menominee and Oneida are co-applicants on this project. Before we could apply, or in our application, we had to include what vendors we were going to use. And so the way that food distribution programs on Indian reservations works now is that all of that food that comes to reservations is ordered and purchased through the USDA, and tribes don't really get a say in where that food comes from, or sometimes even what foods they get. And so this is a pilot project that was funded through the 18 Farm Bill to allow some tribes to try to demonstrate that they could A, find indigenous vendors, and B, get that food into all of the food distribution program clients' boxes. So the elder box is just for elders, and the FDIPR program will serve all clients in food distribution programs. So we have been able to connect with Red Cliff Fish Company, Spirit Lake Rice, Oneida Nation Farms, and Oneida Nation Orchard. And so we will be replacing beef, bison, fish, and apples that comes from the USDA with fish, beef, bison, and apples from Oneida Nation, Red Cliff, and Spirit Lake. We have been meeting weekly. We are close, but we've had to, you have to drop your ego a little bit when you start doing these projects, because as Gary said, it's sometimes tough for tribes to do work like this. And so it's been interesting and exciting, and we look forward to starting soon, hopefully in November. We're thinking we can start making our first orders. But another way of getting better food, more appropriate food into boxes, and supporting local growers.
So remember, this is that, again, as Jen had said, this is that next step. And there were several things we wanted to do with this. We said for tribes, and specifically for Menominee, I'll talk Menominee, we want to look at economic development, but we want to do it sustainably. We have our future generations ahead of us. We could put up factories on this reservation if we want, and we've been asked, you want to put up a gadget factory on your reservation? Well, we'll put up some big buildings, we'll make parking lots, we'll pay you guys will have, some good tax breaks. They start going through all of this, and we said, no, we'll decide what we want, and we need green industry here. And we then said, we not only do we want green industry here, we do know that the climate change is coming, and we knew that before it come to the super forefront here. But we were told, you better look at your own food systems, and looking at Wisconsin has a robust system, but we need to be in that, and we need to grow that. We know now in some of the bigger vegetable and produce bread boxes of the United States, when we look at things like, well, there you go. When we look at things like what's happening in California, Arizona. We look at you could pick a spot where we're looking at the heat or the fires or the droughts, and we can't depend on them with climate change now. We have to take care of what we can do here and in the climate that we have. And by the way, we have to reduce that carbon footprint by bringing food in these trucks all the way across the United States to go into these big, huge warehouses. And of course, they have to be genetically modified in these big food distribution commodity places to be able to be these row crops that they can get using Roundup and for such a easy price, a reduced price. But we didn't want all that. We said, no, it makes too much sense that we do it ourselves where we know the indigenous producers around here and we like what they're doing. We've reduced that carbon footprint. We're increasing our economy by getting these indigenous producers to be able to get food to us. We make jobs as we create this system. So we believe all of what we're doing helps in piloting towards an intertribal food cooperative. And that's that push. And I think we need to take that step. And these are helping with that. We have negotiations. This will start. They have to obligate the monies by the USDA, and they're working with BIA right now on some of the 638 contracts. So this pilot then has to be consummated and put together, and the funding obligated by the end of this month. And of course, USDA is not used to the 638 process like BIA is. So not only are we trying to get ourselves to cooperate and learn, but we're also saying, USDA, you need to understand some of the intricacies of working, buying from producers. And oh, by the way, there's a seasonality to this, and the volumes might not be there, but you have to start understanding this, because we're not going to just settle for a pilot. We're not going to settle for just supplanting or replacing existing foods. There will be a day when we come forward and say, hey, we're looking at more than self-determination of replacing or supplementing foods. At some point, we're going to come forward and say, hey, we want that money you would have normally given to AMS to purchase foods, all of these big row crops, and we want to instead say, give us that money. We'll not only supplant foods, but we want to decide other foods that aren't on the food distribution program, indigenous foods we like and we want. We know what's best for us. We know what got us this far. We want to make those decisions. So there are several things in place here as we move forward. By all means, anything we do is trying to help with the bigger picture, and we appreciate these types of conferences that disseminate from one tribe to another what you've done and what you see as an example of something that maybe others could try or even do better at than us. So we're just saying thanks for this opportunity, and we're stealing ideas as much as anyone else here. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much to both Gary and Jen for sharing such a kind of like a leading example among tribal communities as to how you can take the reins of both, family and community oriented sovereignty. And with the group of participants that are here with us, we do encourage you, if you have any questions, to put it in the Q&A and we'll ask that. And Eric is going to help me with that. One thing that I know as a family member and a community member would be interested in hearing from either of you is how has the Menominee Nation been able to engage with young people, whether that's in schools like K-12 or out of schools, such as just in community-based things, to help ease that pipeline so that maybe there will be more young people that when they get 18 or when they get done with college, they might want to become a producer, or they might want to become somebody that works in the same line that Jen did with food safety or in production or heavy equipment, and the things that are needed for you guys to take those next steps for co-ops. Happy to hear if there's any thoughts on that.
Well, one of the things that, there are several pieces in my job description. It also talks about how we work with our college, our tribal college, the CMN College of Menominee Nation. And what we're trying to do is create that pipeline. Remember, at one point in time, being a farmer was not something most tribal families or tribal members looked at. But now, as we find that it is related to our culture, and oh, by the way, all of our food sources are being put under stress in California and all of these other places. We need to make sure that we are creating that capacity, that human capacity. We have individuals on the tribe that are proposing now that we start an FFA program here on the reservation, which would have been unheard of just 5 years ago. But we're looking at doing that and creating that. It's my guess we would change the name from FFA and think of another terminology that, again, with our sovereignty, we decide what's appropriate. So we're looking at building those systems of bringing the kids up and working them towards the college. We have now worked with WITCAC to really look at the interns that can come through. Dan has worked with us through AIC on trying to look at also getting interns that can work from the community, that can work and receive pay and training to be able to see if this indeed is the right career for them. But we've had within our tribal college then even a sustainable agriculture degree that we've added. And this just started this fall, or it will be starting this fall. And I tell you, it's in its infancy, but we can see how it can take all of those tangents from it, because agriculture is so big. That whole natural resources arena, that's a huge area. And we believe we're bringing people on. We took some tours that I think, again, I'm not magically using 5 years, but 5 years ago, we may not have had in a summer school. We took tours of high school students and showed them two of the existing farms that we have, and the students were totally engaged. I would have never thought I would see them pick up a piglet and get crapped on and laugh. Maybe I can see them doing things that 5-10 years ago they would have had nothing to do with, but now they're getting the big picture, that there's a job where if I want to be outside or if I want to start working, and they understand that there's a food system with it too. So there's a business aspect to this. So everything's starting to grow because we're giving, like anyone, we're giving honor to that. And you have to, these are honorable and related to our culture. So we're seeing people now giving that buy-in, and we've got to keep up with them and not let them down.
Miigwech to you both for an absolutely wonderful presentation, and also some really great photos that you shared. It helps bring you into the project in a different way as well. I had the same curiosity that Scott offered, looking at how youth were involved, and there was something you said at the beginning, Gary, so this is more of a comment, but I really love what you shared about how this work fosters pride in community. And so you had these long-term goals as a part of your project, but I also saw that as part of that long-term goal is that there's this sense of pride and rich sense of place through this work. And I think that the youth involvement has sparked some interest. There was some responses from Jonathan Pruitt, who had talked about engaging with local school community gardens where the food is actually prepared there in the cafeteria. So he's put a few examples in the chat as well for those who are interested. But I really, really love the work that you're doing. And yeah, that pride aspect is a wonderful thing that you shared. So thank you both. Miigwech.
I'll just, I know we're wrapping up here, but I just want to add one last comment of part of what I really think needs, and this is Dan Cornelius with Intertribal Ag Council, and I've been providing some assistance on these efforts, and we need to be able to incorporate these entities within under our own tribal umbrellas, under our own tribal laws. And I think that's one of those pieces. It may not be the most important. I think the most important is just getting these relationships going, which is exciting as what's happening with Menominee and Oneida, but just in general to build out our legal and our policy infrastructure within our tribes. These type of efforts, I think, really put a spotlight on both why and how that can happen. So I think it's exciting as we move forward. And you know, I do want to echo thank you to both Jen and Gary. That was a great presentation.
Thank you for a wonderful evening, and we definitely thank those participants. We know we have people from all over the country and beyond that are in different time zones, and so as we're going to wrap up here for the evening, do consider joining us if you're able to in the Eastern Time Zone, 9 a.m. I'll be working with Frank Adogishik of Little Travis Bay Band. I'll be doing a prayer, and I'll be doing a song, and we'll kind of have some sessions, including a seed remediation and sovereignty project out of U of M, and other projects for tomorrow, including a policy and law-based one out of the University of Arkansas School of Law. So lots to do tomorrow, including louder sessions and other things, and a great keynote in the evening from Robin Wall Kimmer that we're really excited about. So I don't know if we have any last questions. Doesn't look like we have any that I'm seeing in the chat, but shall we close up with a, thank you for being our knowledge keepers and for being our, people that carry this hard work and share it with the future.
Well,
thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Yep. Be safe, everybody.
Y'all go on the